Welcome to this session around middle leadership research and self-evaluation. My name is David Burgess. I'm a Senior Lead Specialist with the Professional Learning and Leadership team, and I have my colleague with me here, Louise Sanders.
Hello, I'm Louise Sanders and I'm Lead Specialist with the PLL team at Education Scotland. Welcome to this session. So this session, you will have engaged with research around middle leadership. You will have engaged in a self-evaluation activity related to the roles of middle leadership and the GTCS standards. And you will also have learned about various networking opportunities for middle leaders across Scotland. So you'll be familiar probably with the National Model of Professional Learning. It could be on the staff room wall. We'd like you to engage a little bit more with the model throughout this session today. If you look at the centre of the model, it's all about children, young people and adult learners. So any professional learning has to impact on learners. You'll see the ring around the outside, learning as collaborative. We talk about network learning, about learning together, and about learning by inquiring. Also, we talk about learning that deepens knowledge and understanding. So not just that superficial learning, but if you think about the other two bits of that circle, so learning as collaborative, learning by inquiring, that's what deepens your knowledge and understanding. You'll see the next ring is professional standards, and these have just been refreshed. So we'll talk about these later when we're talking about your self-evaluation activity, but we would encourage you to engage with the new refreshed professional standards. And leadership of and for learning. As middle leaders, you'll be leaders of your own learning, also leaders of the learning of the children and young people, but also of your teams. So that's really, really important.
Thanks, Louise. So a few articles around the research, and we'll talk a little bit about the research around middle leadership. And when we look at the research, we can see there was a lot in the 1980s, 90s, and then a bit of a dip, and then more research coming in from about 2013, 14. A lot of the research currently coming from Australia. And so two of the articles that you can access through EBSCO, and we'll show you how to access EBSCO through my GTCS at the end of the session. Two articles we refer to in here, you can actually access through EBSCO. So the work of John DeNoble, so researching middle leadership in school to state of the art, and Kylie Lipscomb, who's also based in Australia, middle leadership, a partnership in teaching and learning. We'll take you through a couple of quotes that I've pulled out from those articles, which kind of give the most recent kind of context, I suppose, around middle leadership. There is an article as well, which we use extensively, which Louise will talk around, called Towards a Theoretical Model of Middle Leadership in Schools, which is by John DeNoble. That was published in 2018. Now, there is, if you Google John DeNoble Towards a Theoretical Model of Middle Leadership in Schools, in the Google list, you'll see that you can actually get it for free via Semantic Scholar. So if you go through that, you can access that article and get the PDF. But we'll pick out a couple of things from these articles which support the research and think about research. And as I say, Louise will pick up more deeply about the theoretical model of middle leadership in schools in the session. A couple of quotes for you, and the first is from John DeNoble, and this is about the definition of middle leadership, and largely the focus originally in the research was what is middle leadership. So in 2021 article, John has put in that middle leadership is not just about positions of authority or hierarchy, but the influences people have in the space between senior leadership at one end and teachers and other staff, including junior or emergent leaders, at the other. And I'm reading these out just in case people have issues kind of seeing these and reading them. So that's John's point about where middle leadership is and definition of it. And Lipscomb's point is we define middle leaders as formally appointed leaders with accountable responsibilities who operate between senior leaders and teachers and lead in order to positively impact teaching and student learning. And the starting point that we've put in here about a definition of middle leadership is that actually it's a really complex area, and Louise will pick that up through the model of middle leadership that John DeNoble has designed. We identify that we do have formal and informal middle leaders. So for that programme, for people to participate, we're expecting that people either are in a formal position or that they have an area of responsibility, because we know that there are middle leaders who are not in formal positions but still take on the development of other staff and colleagues within their school setting. Kyla Lipscomb also goes on to talk about positionality and that position of middle leaders and where they sit. So it's slightly different to the definition of what is a middle leader, but that positionality of where middle leaders sit and the roles that they then have. So Lipscomb says for middle leaders, positionality between senior leaders and teachers means they work in two subcultures. One is a formal school leader and often as a support to senior leaders. In contrast, they also work as a leader and teacher colleague to support, facilitate, and sometimes supervise classroom teaching and learning. And I think that's a really important point. You know, research, Cardo and Bassett in different areas, different research from going back into the 90s and 2000s talks about the buffer and the bridge and the middle leaders being really in the middle. And so I think that's a really good quote about that, the different subcultures that middle leaders have to work between and across, which can be very challenging. And so the importance of relationships is crucial in terms of this role. This is, if you can't read this, I do apologise. It's it is in the article, so you'll be able to see it in the article, and I've lifted it from that. But Lipscomb has put down some different characteristics. That's a good summary, I suppose. So we talked about that formal position, and there's a description in there about that formal leadership position. Positionality, which we've just kind of covered, but also highlights teacher agency as well, relational leading practices, and dual and mutual accountability. So I'll just read through those ones. In terms of teacher agency, what Lipscomb identifies is that middle leaders actively work to contribute to and shape the professional agency of those they work with by influencing teachers and enabling them to make positive choices that impact directly and indirectly on teaching and learning. So a really important aspect of this is about empowering staff, empowering colleagues, and Louise will pick this up from the roles that John Denoble's identified in terms of the different roles of middle leadership, about that staff development aspect, about empowering staff, encouraging staff to impact positively on teaching and learning. And relational leading practices are crucial because it's about that leading and influence through trust and collaborative relationships. It's about the role of bringing people together, about working collaboratively with colleagues, and thereby influencing, taking forward that teacher agency. But there's also the accountability. So middle leaders are duly accountable to their principal, so head teacher, because this is Australian research, and their colleagues. Mutual accountability for professional learning between middle leaders and colleagues ensures advancements in teaching and learning are a shared endeavour. So that kind of crucial role of staff development, which is becoming even more important as we go through and look further through the research. And picking up on that point about trusting relationships, it's a long quote, and I will read through it just for those, as I said, who maybe can't see the presentation. Middle leaders are often acknowledged as experts in the classroom, affording them a level of respect with both teachers and school leaders. However, middle leaders have been reported to encounter difficulties in relationships as they simultaneously support and advocate for teachers while concurrently implementing senior leaders' school initiatives. As such, relational leadership practices are key considerations for middle leaders as they work between senior leaders and teachers. So again, it comes back to that middle role, that buffer and the bridge, about implementing and taking forward those overarching strategic implementation plans within schools, whilst also supporting the work of classroom practitioners as well. And it's that relational development, that relational trust, which is crucial in taking forward that, because it can be a bit of an in-between role, clearly. So this is a key element of the how you take forward this role of middle leadership. And I'll just pass you on to Louise.
Thanks, David. So I'm just going to take you through the theoretical model of middle leadership in schools from John Denoble. And if you have participated or are participating in any of our middle leadership programs, this would be familiar to you. So John talks about the inputs into middle leadership to make them effective. And as David said, for principal, read head teacher. So the support of the head teacher and indeed the support of the senior leadership team is really important. The professional development, so the professional learning of the individual, that has a huge impact on their effectiveness. And the school culture. So is there a culture of professional learning? Is there a culture of improvement? Is there a culture of support? That has a huge impact as well. And the enthusiasm and drive of the individual obviously has a real impact on their effectiveness. The knowledge of curriculum, pedagogy and assessment, That is about middle leaders actually talking the talk and walking the walk. So really have that knowledge of curriculum, that knowledge of teaching and learning and of assessment. That is really, really important to their effectiveness. And John has added other here because this is a model that is very much in a work in progress. So you'll see from your discussions that there are obviously other inputs that impact on the effectiveness of a middle leader. So talking about the roles then, in this model, John has identified 6 roles of middle leadership. And in the next few slides, we'll take you through these in a little bit more detail. But if we're starting at the left, the student-focused role, that is, as it says, so focused on students and on learners. The administrative role, so again, that is the sort of admin type tasks, the sort of the paper type tasks, the analysing data and so on. And the organisational role, that's more about organising people, making sure the right people are in front of the right learners. And the admin and organisational tasks are very much sort of inextricably linked. Then you move on to the supervisory role. So that's about supervising in terms of, perhaps classroom visits, observations, learning walks, that sort of thing, leading then into the staff development role. So as we said, when we talked about the National Model of Professional Learning, as middle leaders, your part of your role is leading the professional learning or the professional development of your team and of others. And then on the right-hand side, we're right through to that strategic role that David mentioned. So all these roles are very linked, and it also depends on the actual individual remit of the middle leader as to how much time they spend doing each, and also on the time of year. You can imagine certain times of year when you're doing more sort of strategic planning, obviously be more to the right-hand side of the model, whereas other times of year may be more sort of admin-y or organisational. The really important part of this model is the how. So if you look at the middle, so the leading teams, the managing relationships, which David referred to from Kylie Lipscomb's work, the managing time and the communicating effectively. These are all the how of how these roles are carried out most effectively. Managing self, having that self-awareness. And as I said before, that other is in there because this is a developing model. And you'll see the managing and leading continuum there. And these, it doesn't mean that sort of managing is definitely about student focused and leading right through to strategic. You may be actually managing and leading within each of these roles. And actually John identified a 7th role, and that is when he was working with teachers in Scotland or middle leaders in Scotland, and that is about the role of working with community, working with parents, and working with other partners that I'm sure you'll all identify with. Moving on then to the right hand side of the model, the outputs or the impact of middle leaders. The impact is on teaching quality, so the quality of teaching and learning in that school or in that faculty. Teacher attitudes, so middle leaders by sort of modelling that attitude towards professional learning, that positive attitude towards teaching and learning, that impacts on teacher attitudes, and also on student outcomes, on the outcomes of learners. That is a really, really important output or impact of middle leaders. Again, there's the other part in this model because, as we said, it is an ever-evolving model. So we find this really, really important in underpinning our work and a really important tool as well for identifying roles, but also for discussing the how of roles. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Louise. So, as Louise said, we'll just pick up the different roles in a bit more detail, and this will support the self-evaluation activity that we're going to invite you to participate in towards the end of the session. Now, hopefully you'll have these. We've put these in a Word document, so hopefully you'll have these as well. But just in case you don't, we'll just read through the different roles, and this will be relevant in terms of that self-evaluation to reflect on the roles and where you feel you are within taking forward those different aspects of it. So the student focus role involves working with students and dealing with issues such as problem behaviour, welfare needs, academic choices, and liaison between school and home. Reported that most middle leaders spend significant portions of time working with individual students on issues ranging from behaviour problems to personal problems. So the student focus role, and from the kind of engagement we've done, a lot of middle leaders identify this is the one probably feel most comfortable with, and it's the one that people are closely related to in terms of those student focused aspects. The second role is administrative role, so AD administrative, and then sometimes this can get linked with the organisational role. This one really involves developing procedures, implementing them so that tasks can be carried out effectively. So it includes development of systems such as files, forms and databases for the keeping of records related to a variety of things ranging from purchases and inventory through student achievement and behaviour. So the purpose of the administrative role is to promote efficient use of time resources. And again, from our engagement with middle leaders, this is the one that absorbs probably the majority of time as well. So the administrative role, which can be linked to the organisational role, if you think of organisational administrative as things and organisational as people. So these roles are often treated together in research as managerial work, but they do serve different purposes. So administrative role is mainly about dealing with things. Organisational role primarily concerns people. As part of this role, middle leaders organise teaching timetables and planning, executing, implementing a range of events and activities. So it's making sure that the right people are in the right place, knowing your staff, knowing your pupils, and making sure that the right people are in front of the right classes for their needs. The supervisory role that Louise mentioned is becoming more important. Now that might be about attendance management, etc., but it's also about that quality assurance aspect. So it's involving evaluating the performance of other staff, which in turn involves monitoring, communication, and in some cases remediation. So roles focus on monitoring and reporting the competency of individuals as well as the quality of their work. So it may include classroom observations, giving feedback on observations, or in teaching programs and discussing performance. So that a really crucial role, which from our engagement, middle leaders across our programs identify that's the one that probably find most challenging, and it's those kind of challenging conversations that sometimes need to take place. But the supervisor role links clearly into the staff development role, which is about building capacity of staff members. Okay, so it's about, it may or may not stem from the supervisory role, but middle leader behaviour in this role ranges from engagement and moral support through to direct assistance, mentoring and coaching. And because middle leaders are often regarded as good practitioners, they model best practice and lead by example. So staff development role is crucial. It's not about middle leaders doing everything, but about building capacity within your team to increase that ability to take forward different aspects of work. And that staff development bit is crucial. And apologies for the really small text in this slide, but the strategic role, again, is about vision forming, goal setting and influencing. So while not required in the past, middle leaders are increasingly asked to develop vision or a set of goals for an area of responsibility. So consequently, they are required to persuade other staff to buy in and work towards that vision or set of goals. Collaborative styles of leadership that cultivate positive, trusting relationships are beneficial. And it goes back to that point that Lipscomb made as well about relational trust. The strategic role implies motivating, persuading others to follow a particular policy line or get involved in implementing change, and using a power relationship to get compliance from individuals who may be resisting change. The strategic role is likely to be much easier to carry out if middle leaders are good staff developers, supervisors, administrators, and organisers, because they're creating optimal conditions for influence and change. So these are the 6 different roles, and I say, we've gone through them very quickly, but you should have those in the document as well to give you a bit of time to go through them and support as you start to consider those different roles and the standards about the self-evaluation activity, which we're going to talk you through just now.
Thanks, David. So the key questions then for self-evaluation: what role am I most confident doing? What has the biggest impact on student outcomes? And which has been the biggest learning curve in my move to middle leadership? So we'll just talk you through a self-evaluation wheel. Some of you may have used this before. So if you refer to the 6 roles that we've spoken about, and you'll see that there are actually 8 spokes on the wheel. So also refer to the GTCS standards. So if you look at the standards for middle leadership and perhaps pick 2 of the standards that you'd like to explore more thoroughly. And then if you populate these around the outside, this can be a tool for your own self-reflection, or possibly for a coaching conversation that you're having with somebody. So if you look at the wheel, if you look at 0 in the middle, that is if you really think that actually this is an area that, you know, I'm really not good at, and then 10 being an area that I'm really sort of top of my game. So we'll just show you a wheel that we've done earlier. We call this the wonky wheel for obvious reasons. So if you look at this person here, they carried out their self-evaluation in September 21. And they looked at the student focus role, read around it, and identified that actually this was a strength. So they were on about a sort of 8 for this. And then if you go round towards the right, look at the administrative role. This was an area that they felt that they needed to develop. They're on a sort of a 3. Organisational was a little bit stronger, and staff development, again, an area that they needed to develop. Supervisory, again, you can see from this an area of strength, as was the strategic role. And then you'll see that there are 2 of the standards for middle leadership just added in there as well. So you can see from this wheel that there's areas of strengths, areas of development. And we would suggest that if you're looking at this and wanting to develop further, develop an area of that you'd like to work on, but also develop an area of strength as well. So don't just choose the areas that you think you need the most development. And this can be used again in a few months' time and do a sort of double mapping exercise. So again, revisit the questions, revisit your self-evaluation, perhaps choose a different colour, and you can see progress or not. So we find this a really sort of simple but effective self-evaluation tool. And as I said, if you've got somebody that you can discuss this with, have a coaching conversation, again, that can help with your thinking.
Thanks, Louise. So just to pick up then as we go towards the end of the session, there are, just to highlight the different areas that you can become involved in. If we're thinking about those areas for development, share some resources that might be helpful with that as well. First thing is about Middle Leaders Community. So we have, if you're on Twitter, great. If you're not, don't worry. But there's a lot of activity on Twitter. We have a couple of specific feeds for educational middle leaders. So hashtag EdScotML. So feel free to tweet during this session as well about sharing what your thoughts, reflections are. But we also have hashtag Middle Lead Monday. So on a Monday that comes out, and generally it might be an article, it might be a quote, something to kind of stimulate discussion. The one that we just tweeted recently, we can put in different articles, we can put in links to events. So just kind of have a look out for Middle Lead Monday within the within Twitter. We've also got professional learning activities. Now you can access them through the professional learning website, and again we'll put the link will have been shared. So if you access the professional learning website, professionallearning.education.gov.scot, you can register with your school or Glow email address, and you will get instant access to the professional learning resources. And in here you can find different activities. There are professional learning activities. So in the Learn tab, you can go through and look at different activities specifically about middle leadership. And some of the activities you can see here are listed. We've got professional activities related to each of the different roles that Louise highlighted from the John DeNoble model. So we've got different roles and professional activities which would take you through step by step, links to articles, reflective questions. You can save them, you can come back and complete at different times. It's linked to the GTS standards, so useful for PRD and professional update as well. So we encourage you to have a look at that, and that's all free access. And of course, you don't have to do those professional activities individually. You can work with members of your team, you can use those resources and use them to support your team meetings with your colleagues. We can also access articles through EBSCO. We talked about the Lipscomb and DeNoble articles that you can access for free through EBSCO. If you log into My GTCS, and when you log into My GTCS and go to research, you will see it will take to this page here, and you would click on the Visit Education Scotland, Education Source EBSCO, and it would take you to here. And then you can type in DeNoble, type in Lipscomb, and it will give you those articles. You can get the PDF, save the PDF, and you can read that as well. So lots of articles that you can access through EBSCO, but that is through My GTCS, and so you need to log into My GTCS to access that. Okay. So thank you very much for your engagement in this session. Hopefully you found that useful. Anything at all, you can drop us an email at edspll@educationscotland.gov.scot. You can tweet as well using the hashtag EdScotML and at EdScotPLL. So hope that's been useful for you, and thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.